Hisham Abed is up for his first Emmy as a series director of Queer Eye, and it's a long time coming, as he was the main cinematographer for Laguna Beach back in 2004. Then he was the producing director on The Hills when it premiered in 2006. Now I have him here with me now for Gold Derby. I'm Riley Chow, contributing editor. Hisham, first of all, what does it mean to be a reality director?
That's a good question. It sometimes depends on the type of show you're doing. I often combine my duties as a director and director of photography because I started as a director of photography. So oftentimes people bring me on because they want a very specific look. Sometimes it's just a matter of fitting the right person for the right job. And so being a director encompasses sort of dialing in a look for a specific show or series and pulling together all the right pieces to make that happen, the type of camera, the right crew, and then setting up, like I usually set up a visual lookbook or Bible, as some people call it, that people reference and to try to establish a common language or visual style for any one show. And then on a given day, provided we've scouted locations, I might have a good idea of where I'd like to put cameras, depending on what sort of scene would be unfolding. And that would be the things that are taken into consideration when shooting are which way is the light coming from, which way would I like to point the cameras to get to photograph the light and our content in the best manner, and then take it from there. And there's a very big difference, obviously, between a show like Laguna Beach or The Hills compared to something like Queer Eye. Queer Eye really almost more documentary, obviously, than something like The Hills, which is a bit more produced. Put it nicely, I guess. Not that the emotions aren't real in either situation, but it's a different way of capturing them, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, and you're not a producer on Queer Eye, as I understand it. So how much of a role do you have in crafting the narrative? You know, what the Fab Five are doing in a given episode, or how you select the heroes of the given episode?
Yeah, I'm not particularly involved in casting the heroes for any episode. That starts with the execs and the casting directors. But and then also crafting the narrative is, I think, that making sure that any specific piece that might be needed to create the story is my job, to make sure that we're on people's faces at the right times for very specific emotions, whether they're happy, sad, glad, and orchestrating all the sort of mechanical side to capture the emotion. That's a lot of what I do. And again, also applying an aesthetic that I like that helps enhance the emotions. To give an example, a very simple example, like if you took a comedy, in a very broad general sense, comedies are lit kind of high key, and dramatic shows are lit kind of low key, where there's more contrast and mood. So I look for those kinds of things in a given setting. Say Karamo's sitting a hero down to have a real heart to heart. We kind of want that to have a little bit more gravitas than maybe. I don't want to, not that Anthony or Tan or Jonathan or Bobby are going to have any less gravitas in their scenes. But if, for example, Anthony is meant to be having a lot of fun cooking, that's going to be a little more high key. So the environment will reflect that, as does the lighting and photography. And those are the sort of things I try to orchestrate with any member of the Fab Five, with our camera crew, and the lighting itself.
Yeah, can you speak more just about the look of this show?
Yeah, I think the look of the show is always aimed to be authentic. So if anything feels off or produced, it just doesn't have a place in the show. So to sort of help execute that, we are handheld cameras, which means I think the viewer can feel that there's an energy to that somebody is carrying that camera and putting it in that place. it's never really super, super steady unless for some reason it needs to be like for our interstitial B-roll scenes, as we call them, where we establish a location or something like that. But I think that the handheld energy is sort of something that underscores that authenticity, and it helps us sort of move quickly and silently, and we're less encumbered by things like a tripod or a dolly that you might have on a scripted show, or even some competition shows on TV that are classified as reality shows. So creating that look, I think I might be straying from your question a little bit, Riley, but the things that we do for Queer Eye specifically, I would say, is to maintain our authenticity, and I think to make sure that the camera, the lighting, enhances that authenticity, if that answers your question. I can get a lot more specific if you'd like me
to. So the show last year, the first season of the Netflix reboot, it was nominated for 4 Emmys. It won 3 of them. This year it's up for 6, and one of the nominations that it added was for you in the reality directing category. And last year the show didn't even submit in that category because it didn't have a credited director. They had executive producer Jen Lane as the uncredited director. But what does it mean for the show to have a director now? And why make that change after having 17 episodes that were so successful?
Yeah, indeed, the first 2 seasons were very successful. I mean, I think they set a benchmark for heartfelt and emotional reality television that hasn't been seen in a long time, or if at all. So Jen Lane asked me to come and work on the first 2 seasons, and we're good friends from all the way back in Laguna Beach, shooting that show for MTV. And I wasn't available, so I was really happy to jump on the second season. And I think she learned that she had taken on probably a lot more than she really wanted to handle on seasons 3 and 4. For the first 2 seasons, she was executive producing, she was show running, she was finding the format for the show, and her to be able to step back and give the directing and sort of the photography aspect to somebody else was probably a great relief for her. Actually, I know it was, because she's always still very, very busy in her role as an executive producer, and always very close to the content, and always engaged, but able to step back and have probably a better bird's eye view of everything than she was able to have the first 2 seasons. And so for me, to come on as a director and just concentrate on delivering the look and the emotion and the content that's needed to be able to put the show together, as my job entails, was a real joy, and I'm really grateful that I was able to hop on for the seasons 3 and 4.
And what surprised you about how this show operates?
The things that surprised me about how the show operates are how quickly a simple conversation can get so deep and so real and so heartfelt, and that any one of the Fab Five is capable of doing that. I mean, Karam was known for doing that. I mean, that's his thing, and he's so good at it. But it's always a surprise when, you might have Tan or Anthony or Jonathan, any of them, honestly, Bobby, have a conversation with somebody that also cuts right to the chase, cuts to the heart of our heroes' stories, and helps the heroes discover something about themselves that's missing in their lives, or something that they don't recognize in themselves that is there. So that's the thing that always surprised me, is how beautifully emotional the stories that we tell can be. It's day to day. And if a hero starts crying, then 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, the crew, ourselves, everybody in the room or outside of the room watching is going to break down in tears as well.
So the reality directing category has existed for many years at the Directors Guild of America Awards, where you've been nominated a couple times, but it only started at the Emmys last year. So I'm wondering, with the category being kind of, hodgepodge of competition shows and shows like Queer Eye and what have you. How did you vote on it last year?
I didn't vote. I have not been a member of the TV Academy. I've been a member of the DGA for about 10 years, but I'm not actually. I only literally just joined, and but if I were to vote, I think it's important to take into consideration whether the show is structured or not, because I do think that there's a big distinction between a lot of reality shows that are considered structured, that are like, as you mentioned, game shows essentially, and other types of shows that are sort of the docu-soaps and things like that, things that we know from the shows that I've worked on, like The Hills, which has been rebooted, and things, there's a great many others. I do think that there's a very big distinction between those two, and I would vote on them accordingly. And it's nice that the Academy has sort of separated structured from unstructured, because I think the ones that are attempting a sort of more traditional narrative or docu-soap, if you want to call it that, are very different in the way that they are made, structured, presented, versus competition shows, which are generally the structured versions, although ours is structured because it has its format, but obviously it's quite different. It's really not a competition show, clearly.
I can't believe you weren't invited sooner.
Yeah, I'd say that's quite possibly my fault. I don't know. Haven't really sought it out, and it was sort of fortuitous this time around, I guess.
All right, so you have submitted the episode, or Netflix has, Black Girl Magic. So how did you choose that as your submission out of, all of your options?
Yeah, I chose the episode Black Girl Magic out of the options that were options from season 3, because I recognized when we were shooting that show, literally day one, when the Fab Five met Jess, that they immediately formed a very strong bond with her. I mean, they had such a connection, Bobby especially, for obvious reasons. And if people haven't seen the episode, it's because Jess had been adopted, and then when she was outed, or tried to come out in her family, she was literally sent packing immediately. Bobby had a very similar experience, and so their bond was really strong. And I think there was just a huge amount of sympathy for her, and all the guys recognized it, and were just a huge fan of her and wanted to support her in any way that they could. And I believe they really did. They really helped her out, at least.
And what are your favorite segments of the show? Like, who of the Fab Five is your favorite, I guess?
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot, Riley. Who's my favorite of the cast? That's yeah. If this gets beyond us, I'm going to be in trouble. I mean, I'm going to act like maybe a parent does when they talk about their kids. Don't have any favorites, but I certainly enjoy working with all of them for all of their particular specialties and different reasons. I mean, who doesn't love food? I love food. It's great to watch Anthony cook. It's amazing to watch Karamo sit down and just cut through anybody's emotional barriers they may have, and then just get to the heart of why they need to be helped or just made better, as we call it. Who doesn't love Jonathan and his amazing passion for what he does, and his enthusiasm and his vulnerability and his just emotional availability? Everybody loves that, because we all wish we could be like that. And Bobby just blows us away every week with his design work. And also, just as I mentioned earlier, he can cut to a conversation and get to just the heart of the matter just as well as any of them. Tan as well. He has such style. His hair is always perfect. And I'm surprised if it's not ever. And they're all equally invested, and they all have beautiful contributions to the show. It wouldn't be Queer Eye without the Fab Five, so it's hard to pick favorites.
And are you coming back for next season?
Unfortunately, again, my availability has precluded me from working on seasons 5 and 6, which are currently shooting. I literally wrapped on a show last Friday for Disney Plus, their new streaming network, and it overlapped with literally all of season 5, and there will be a new director for seasons 5 and 6.
Okay, and do you know who that director is, and what show are you working on instead?
I believe the new director for seasons 5 and 6 is don't quote me on that, but he is somebody that I know that we've worked with on Laguna Beach that Jen and I both know. And it's Mark Perez. That's who it is. Why did I say Mark Perez? Yeah, Mark Perez, wonderful guy, and he's doing seasons 5 and 6. And I just finished working on Encore, a reality show for Disney Plus's new streaming video on demand service that's coming out this fall. Encore is a show that reunites people that have done musicals in high school, reunites them 10, 20, 30, 40 years later to come back and put on the exact same musical, and oftentimes in the same school where they first put it on. It's a fun show and also has great emotional components to it.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing more of that. And Hisham, thanks very much for taking the time to chat.
Thank you, Riley. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
And to our viewers, you can subscribe to our channel for other videos like this, and also go to goldderby.com to log your own Emmy predictions.